actually about digital collaboration. So we're going to start off with Andrej giving an overview of how things have changed over the past few years, similar but different to the presentation yesterday. And then I'll be talking a bit more about specifically about the coordinated data scramble and then a proposal that we're putting together. And then Roxanne will give some examples from recent emergencies. And then we've got two slightly different but related presentations, one about collaboration in iMMAP and one for
the Syria crisis.
And then GeOnG experiences with collaboration with all of it.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so Andrej.
All right, so perhaps the second presentation I give this week about largely about history. So I just want to sort of set it up to give, let's say, a little bit more context to what the other four panelists will talk about in terms of where we've come to or why we've ended up at a place where we need a coordinated data scramble. If this will work. And now, there we go. Okay, so this is a history from about 2010 onwards. So I'm going to speak mostly to the time before that. This is a graphic that was recently shared by the Digital Humanitarian Network, talking about all the different points of things that had happened sort of 2011 through 2016. So there's been a lot of activity in the data scrambled space. It has been sort of like I talked about the other day about like IM investment cycles. It's been up and down in terms of capacity, largely because it's been a volunteer effort. And you know, how many people like to volunteer for coordination? It doesn't tend to be one of those fun things to volunteer for. So if I go back, we were talking about 10 years ago before. We go back to 2006, so I started looking back at how were we dealing with data scrambles in the past. We had physical places. They were mentioned yesterday, the humanitarian information centers in country. They were working sometimes with little to no internet connection, but this is where the information management officers these were mostly all hired by OCHA, a few partners, would get together. This is where the local community knew they could come, and they would share and exchange data. Things like in Afghanistan where they had beer for data kind of exchanges, all kinds of creative ways to move data around. Internet was poor, it was expensive. Connections were very much one-to-one, personal basis. Email was the standard method for dealing with people outside of the emergency zone. That was slow, difficult, attachment size, maximums, all these kinds of lovely things that we don't have to deal with in today's age, and the time zones were very much a factor. For me, 2009 was, I would say, the beginning of the change, largely because we were starting to see many more or a much larger percentage of people using Skype. So it allowed people to connect much easier, much less bandwidth requirement, and so on. And that we were starting to see a lot more IM-like people enter the market. From a very business perspective, a lot more people, right? So CartONG started in 2006 with like 2 people. You start to scale up, and more of these organizations were entering the space and becoming active, or much more visibly active in 2009. 2010, the Haiti earthquake. This is where, let's say, the humanitarian sector woke up in a kind of a mean way, I guess, to what was potentially possible because of things like the Haiti crisis map, that all of a sudden people around the world could be working, collecting information from the affected population, could be interacting with the population, could be crowdsourcing, putting onto a map, and so on. So the possibilities started to become more apparent. And whether you love it or you hate it, this is where the report called Disaster Relief 2.0 came from, and really started to change the minds and the mentality, at least from the OCHA side, at least a few of our more senior officials, to recognize that maybe information management and technology was something we should be playing more in. Again, from the OCHA side, 2011 was Libya. So this was a case, and it was interesting to sit upstairs in one of the speed geeking sessions where the scenario they had was you didn't have access in country. This is exactly what happened in Libya. Everyone was leaving. Even Red Cross was pulling people out. Okay? So the UN, from the OCHA side, they start asking us questions. What's happening in country? We need to know who is delivering as local partners and where is it happening. Well, we don't have any real way to do it because our traditional partners are all getting out of the country. Right? So this is where we said, okay, well, let's collaborate with the Standby Volunteer Task Force, Humanity Road, and some others to collect social media. And this became the UN's first official request to volunteers in such an emergency to collect the information from us. But it was also when we started to see a lot of duplication in data hunting. Partly because more and more people are online, and we're starting, the volunteers are telling us about a request from the World Bank, from iMMAP, so we're hearing about all these different kinds of requests and starting to see the duplication. Later that year, we ran a lessons learned workshop. In there, this is where the Digital Humanitarian Network eventually was formed out of. But there's also several community of interests around decision makers' needs, impact evaluation, and one of them was the need for coordination in the sort of data scramble concept. Because everyone's running around looking for what is effectively very similar information. Same time, this is when OCHA finally said, okay, we'll actually allow Skype. Because before that, it was not allowed. They looked the other way, but on our machines, we weren't supposed to have Skype. And so then the IT section came to me, and they knew I was using it, and they said, okay, how about we let you use this as a pilot? Right? And essentially, they let the cat out of the bag, because I was like, okay, here we go. And like within minutes, I had set up a Skype group with all of the information management officers in OCHA. And all of a sudden, it turned our very much vertical support system where the field had to email headquarters, and then the headquarters would respond several hours later, and then the field would respond the next day, into a horizontal. So an IMO in Iraq could help an IMO in Cambodia. And we actually had that, where Cambodia, there were some small floods. They had IMOs from Pakistan, Haiti, West Africa, and so on, helping literally to create 3W products overnight for the IMOs in Cambodia. What really then opened up the IMOs and even our management's eyes to, oh, maybe actually this is acceptable and we should be doing this. Now, anybody here from the World Bank? Okay, good. That's not an evil thing. I was sitting in the World Bank right after the Libya and Japan lessons learned, and I'm sitting there with GFDRR, and this was the Kenya, I think this was the East Africa food crisis, whatever at the time, if I remember right. And one individual says, oh, I need to get a hold of a certain data set. Oh, well, my friend at USAID maybe knows somebody in the embassy who can speak to the government, and I was like, well, I know the OCHA Information Management Officer in Kenya has that data, right? So I could see that there was going to be a lot of noise created just by one organization to maybe find the data, when actually that data was already there and it was already available online. But just people weren't connected, they weren't coordinated. So it was how do we bring these together? So I saw the diagram kind of like this. I literally drew this after walking out of the World Bank. Right, they were all going all over the place. The different organizations at the bottom. Don't worry, Andrew, I can send this to you if you want. And we create a lot of mess. Where we wanted to go was something a little bit more like this. There's still going to be chaos, trust me, it's going to happen. But at least the organizations could interact with some kind of data scramble, to which I didn't say what it was. It doesn't have to be an organization, it doesn't have to be a tool, because we all like tools, right? It could be just a Skype group or something. It's a kind of layer that helps reduce the amount of noise that we see here. There's still going to be some noise, but how do we reduce that? So one of the things that came out shortly was the Common Operational Datasets Registry, thanks to ICT for Peace, who paid to build it on humanitarian response, which has now been migrated to HDX. So for me, before jumping to the last four, the questions I actually have around this is a couple things. Is it actually harder now because of more connectivity? One of the common themes I keep hearing out of these Skype groups and Slack groups is there's too much noise. There's too much, people are asking for the same things, I don't know when to engage or not. And as Andrew said the other day, maybe that's a good problem to have, right? Versus everyone spinning all over the place. But are we, causing more headaches for the people in country than we did in the past? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but are we doing that? Are we causing them more of a headache, and if so, how do we improve that? And how do we make it better today? Right? So we've been playing with Skype groups, we've been playing with Slack groups. This is where Helen has been leading a charge, an unpaid charge as a volunteer, trying to figure out how do we actually make this better, and how do we do that? Do we need capacity? Do we need better tools and so on? So I will leave it there and hand it to Helen.
So just while we're looking at that machine, are there any questions for Andrej? Comments? I have a terrible habit when I'm presenting of talking way too fast, and I tend to speed up. So if I'm already speaking fast for you, it's going to get worse. So please do stop me if I start to go too fast, and I'll try to slow down. And I also welcome questions throughout the presentation as well, because that also helps to slow me down.
First question, Helen. Why do you speak too fast?
So I've got so much to say.
Good answer.
Right.
We didn't have that whiteboard, by the way. That whiteboard we have here.
Yeah.
We don't need them.
Close enough.
Want to stand in the chair?
Okay. Should be fine.
Okay, so as Andrej was saying, I've been essentially trying to lead the coordinated data scramble and decision makers needs communities of interest for probably about 5 years now. And as it's evolved, I've started referring to it more as digital collaborative spaces rather than the coordinated data scramble, because we're finding with these groups that a lot of the focus is on data, but also there are other questions and collaborations that happen by having people all in the same place. So when I talk about digital collaborative spaces and the data scramble, they're essentially the same thing. And yeah, it's all about trying to organise a little bit of this chaos to get the right information to the right people at the right time. So again, Andrej already showed this picture, but essentially he highlighted in a recent blog that in the past a massive duplication has existed and it's continued to persist. So tools for collaboration have been available for a long time, but they haven't really been used. So that's what this project is all about. So why do we have digital collaborative spaces? Firstly, hoping to reduce duplication of effort and gaps in collaboration. We're hoping to increase dynamic sharing of information and shared understanding of priority data and information collection needs. And we're hoping this will result in greater access to more consistent data and a better overall understanding of humanitarian needs and the common operational picture. Again, what are these spaces? Basically, it's just a community. Everyone's equal in that community, and it's people who have or need information or knowledge or skills. They may be deployed locally, they may be supporting remotely. The biggest thing about everyone that joins this group is that it's a fairly self-selecting group of people who want to collaborate. And so what we're doing is trying to enable that through innovative technology. So we're looking at trying to facilitate instantaneous communication, so that can be using Skype, it can be using Slack, it can be using WhatsApp. Definitely what we're not trying to do is prescribe what people have to use, we're just trying to get a community together that can develop the appropriate and use the appropriate tools for the specific situation, and that varies obviously with each response. We also then have a need to collaboratively create documents or share files and organise information. So again, there's lots of tools out there for that. There's Google Drive, there's Box, there's Dropbox, there's probably lots of others as well. And we've seen all these different tools used in different types of emergencies. And then also dynamically and collaboratively kind of managing projects throughout an emergency as well. So particularly recently we've been looking a lot at the use of Trello for that. And obviously the good thing about this is that it can all be done regardless of location and organisational affiliations, and it can be done in open or protected environments. So if it's in a place where there's not too much need for protection, then it can be very open. If it's in a place where there's more concerns, then obviously there's lots of people in the community that know how to secure things down a bit but still enable collaboration. So the famous Andrew quote, which I use in every presentation. So after the Ebola response, Andrew very kindly sent this email saying, from our viewpoint, sorry, Andrew from British Red Cross, anyone that doesn't know. From our viewpoint, this has dramatically improved the sharing of GIS data and the communication between organisations. We've seen collaboration and sharing of data and capabilities between divergent organisations, geographies and time zones because of the forums and conversations facilitated by this, which was wonderful because that's what we're trying to do. So we've run a number of these over the past few years, and we've had different groups of people involved depending on the type of disaster. I've put a question mark next to affected population because someone has added that. I'm not entirely sure if we've ever had affected population in the collaborative spaces, but it's definitely something that we aim for. I think perhaps in Nepal we did, but maybe Roxanne can answer that later. So where do they happen? I'm going to, Roxanne's going to give some more detailed examples of responses over the past few years, but currently we have 2 collaborative spaces running. We have the Skype group for the Haiti hurricane, and we've also set a preparedness one up for the typhoon that's about to hit the Philippines. So we've got a Skype group for Haiti. We've got a coordination Google spreadsheet. So this is linked to from the Skype group, and it has several different tabs. You can't actually read them because of the screen, but it has a tab for contacts, so people can share how to directly contact them. I can't see now. It has daily summaries, so Roxanne very often comes onto these Skype groups and summarises the information so that people, as Andrej was saying, some people find that they can't keep up with 200 messages that are shared in a day. So we try to have these daily summaries where we just pull out the important bits of information. And also for Haiti, we had these collaborative spreadsheets as well, where we had all the administrative names and populations in a collaborative spreadsheet, and then we were encouraging people on the group to add comments about the impact so that we could get a more kind of shared understanding of the picture more quickly. We have a Trello board for the Data Scramble. It's a real shame that you can't see this, and neither can I. But basically, on the left we have a list of all the general data needs that we know are needed during an emergency, and then we have a column for moving the cards. For if someone starts discussing a particular type of data in the Skype group, then we will move the card to the doing column, so that you can just look at that and see, well, we know that someone is already working on getting that type of data. And then once the data is available, then we put the URL to the data set and we move it to the done column. So it's not a data repository, it's just trying to group conversations around specific types of data. So each card represents a type of data. And the ultimate aim is that we get people to share data via HDX, because that's becoming the place where most data is shared. So again, Roxanne's got a great visual of this, but we're basically just facilitating going from the question of where is this data, or I need this data, to the data is now available here. And then yesterday we set up a group for the Philippines. So again, we've already got a Skype group there. We've got a coordination spreadsheet where people are starting to already share their contact details, and then we've got a Trello board. So again, you can already see that even before the typhoon has hit, we've got 8 data sets that are already being discussed, and we've got 4 that there's already a link available for you to access that data. So we're also trying to learn lessons from these groups. Each time something happens, we try and learn about how to improve the situation. So one of the things that we realised is that we need standard lists of data needs and emergencies, and not only to say we need this type of data, but also how do you access it, how do you analyse it, how do you present it. So try and learn those lessons so that if someone hasn't used that type of data before, they can see where to get it and also how to analyse it to hopefully get some of the key answers to the key questions that we know are needed in the first few weeks of response. We're also working with, there's a 72-hour task force which is trying to bring together all the main agencies that work on information analysis in the first 72 hours. So we're working with them to survey all these people, find out what information they have, what information they need, and then tie that into this work that we're doing for developing the standardised list of data needs and analytical processes. And then the good thing about having these standard lists of data needs is that then you can build other tools off of that. So for the last couple of emergencies, we've been working on this map filter project, which is taking maps from ReliefWeb and tagging them with which key questions we think they could help answer and which data sets they show, so that if you want to find a data set because you want to answer a specific question or because you want to see a specific data set, you can filter out specifically those maps. So this might be a bit too slow. So basically you can hover on the, so the key questions that are highlighted there are ones that were agreed on during Decision Makers Needs workshop. I think Andrej talked about those yesterday. So there's been at least 2 workshops that have brought together field-based decision makers and maps and what their priority questions are. So you can see how many maps might help answer that question. You can filter by the data map. You can filter by which data sets are shown on there. So you can also see that if you click on a specific question, then it tells you which data sets are also shown on that map. So you can really narrow down. You can say, I want to know damage assessment maps that show roads or that show schools or whatever. So then the other thing that's led to, again, as I say, through having these standardised lists of questions and data sets, is that then you can start to, in almost real time, analyse how the situation is changing during emergency as well. So this is a Tableau visualisation of the data that fed into that filter that you just saw. So you can see that on the 2nd of October, there were about 5 maps that showed geographic and climate data. There were a few more that showed pre-crisis infrastructure. And then you can start to go. So that was on the 3rd of October, that was the first day. And then you can start to see that changing. And you can also filter from the category of data down to the actual data set. So you've got administrative boundary level 1, level 2, level 3. So the idea is that we can maybe link this to things like the Trello board, so that if you look at a card for a particular type of data, then you can also see which map shows the data. And then you can do exactly the same for the key questions. So you can see which key questions might be answered by maps on each day of the response. It's kind of cumulative. So you start to see that the first damage assessment map was 2 days after the event. So it starts to show how well we're meeting the targets for sharing data sets and answering questions. So where do we want to take this into the future? As Andrej was saying, this has all been very much a volunteer project with a huge amount of people contributing to it. I think it's fair to say they've definitely been successful. We've had lots of good feedback, but because they've been volunteer-led, they've been variable and inconsistent. So we're wanting to say, well, what if digital collaboration was better coordinated with integrated standards and taxonomies, more connected to operational activity? Still a huge amount of the people involved in them tend to be remote, so how do we get more people in the field involved? Particularly looking at things like when they have poor connectivity and things like that. Looking at security issues, because you're inviting lots of different types of people in. How do you address security issues, particularly when you're in countries that might have more issues with that? And then how do we better manage this flow of people asking and looking at data which should be available on HDX? So we feel that the opportunities to improve disaster management through digital collaboration are big, and we hope that will start to help to answer the question that Andrej was raising earlier about people are complaining that it's adding more noise, but we feel that these tools are there, they are going to be used, so we might as well harness them and develop them and improve them, and get Skype and Slack and all these people to work with us to help summarise that information and make it less confusing for people. So what we're looking at is trying to get a project started focusing on 3 main areas, so community capacity building, having the time between emergencies to train people about how to use them, developing technology and tools. So again, the aim is not to develop a tool or to enforce a tool, it's just to say, these are all the tools that are available, this is how you use them, this is their strengths and weaknesses, these are examples from the past. So really be able to learn lessons and improve things as we go along. And then particularly we're quite interested in trying to establish if we can an innovation fund. So what we found is that these groups have really inspired a lot of innovation. So how can we get some funding so that if someone develops a new add-on tool, that we can then fund them to be able to kind of move that from a volunteer thing to something that's really valuable in all emergencies. So we're looking at trying to form a team which includes all the different types of people who contribute to these. So how do we have people that can bring in the formal global responders and national responders? How do we bring in tech providers both from the public sector and the private sector? how do we bring in remote digital humanitarian communities and local civic tech communities, and also particularly researchers as well. I think Roxanne's going to talk about a few researchers that have contacted us to try and be able to join the group so that they can also research how the collaboration happens and how it can be improved. So the outputs and outcomes of the project would be development of more standards and control vocabularies, documentations of platforms and tools, and particularly capacity enhancement. That, as I said at the beginning, will hopefully improve to getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And I just wanted to say that although I've been kind of nominally leading it, it's been contributed to by massive amounts of people. You'll see a few of those faces in this room, and a lot of people that aren't on there as well who really have contributed to. I think my main message is that it's all about collaboration. We need people to get involved, and there's nothing prescribed. It's just a community, and we can research things to do anything that you're interested in the realm of collaboration for emergencies. Did I speak too fast?
That was lovely.
Thank you.
Are there any quick questions before we move on? I'd kind of like, if possible, to have questions at the end, because then that will bring everything together, but if there's anything specific, I can answer now. Okay, I'll hand over to Roxanne.
I hope this works. So hi there. My name is Roxanne Moore. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the case studies, specifically from reverse chronology, Haiti, Hurricane Matthews, Ecuador earthquake, Nepal earthquake, and West Africa Ebola. So now, Helen's talked about this, and this is something that I'm really interested in. Essentially, understanding the communication flows. So in the digital collaborative spaces, we're primarily using Skype to communicate with one another. That's a tool. That tool can be exchanged. Those discussions specifically related to data are being tracked by Helen in the coordinated data scramble, along with lots of other people. Again, another tool that can be changed. Ultimately, we're interested in how the communications, general communications, the data communications can be shared via a platform. For data, HDX. For products, maps, infographics. Maybe it's Relief Web, maybe it's humanitarian response.info, maybe it's something else. But we want to ensure that these communications get somewhere so that other people can find them. And here's the timeline. As mentioned, West Africa Ebola, Nepal earthquake, Ecuador earthquake, and the Haiti hurricane. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the communication aspect of it, and how people are leveraging Skype to communicate with one another. So as Andrej and Helen mentioned, pinging in the corner of your computer screen is good, but it can sometimes be overwhelming. And I kept hearing people saying that that's overwhelming, but I didn't know what was overwhelming. Was 20 messages a day overwhelming, or was 200? So I started out with West Africa Ebola. There's 232 persons active in that group. That's not to mention all the persons who joined in but never said anything. And active is defined as at least one message contributing content. They represent 92 organizations. And when I think about that upon itself, that's pretty remarkable. The number of people who are all interested in trying to work together as to share information and solve these really complex issues. And I found out that number on what is too much. During the peak month, it was an average of 114 messages per day. And that happened for 4 months. So from August to December, it was averaging that high. In the low months, which was May, it was 2 messages per day. This is averaged out over days. And the interesting thing is that there was this assumption that digital response was happening in a bubble. and was completely independent of humanitarian response. And issues with connectivity, I understand that. So sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect. However, the communications via Skype and via these digital communities mirrored the Ebola caseloads. So when peak caseloads were occurring, these digital communities were the most active. When the caseloads were down, the digital communities were also quiet. So it helped to show these weren't exactly way off in a community all upon themselves, but it's trying to match and mimic and work alongside the humanitarians on the ground. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is 50% of all the active persons were solely digital people. However, they contributed 75% of the messages. And to some regards, that also makes sense to me, because if I'm digitally based, I can only communicate in a digital manner. If I'm field-based, well, and you're also field-based, well, I can turn to you and talk to you. I don't have to communicate in a digital manner. So for that, those numbers for me made sense. And that was something I was okay with. And it was something that I wanted to start tracking over time. So moving forward to the next case study, in Nepal, this response went on for 7 months, or this community was open for 7 months. There was 202 people overall, and 84% of them were active, so they contributed at least once. So we have a high number of people wanting to engage. It also meant that we started having some more people just listening or testing out or seeing if this is something that they were comfortable engaging in. If I start breaking down the average number of notifications, you see a big peak at the top and then trickles down a lot. That very first day, it was a Saturday. So this is something that was really interesting. Digital responders are really active on the weekends and on the nights, because that's when they're volunteering their time. And so that very first day, there was over 750 messages, and that was a Saturday. So there was a really big digital surge trying to help support this response activity. So week 1, to an average of 282, went down to 74, went down to 43, next month average of 4. So essentially, if we're doing things right, digital communities are really active in the beginning, and as teams are on the ground, as teams are working to respond, we can hand over what we've developed digitally and allow people on the ground to validate that, rather than having them have to create that. So if we're doing a really good job, we can hand over, and that's something I'm really excited about. And I started looking at something else. 38% of all messages came during the Nepal working hours, and Nepal was pretty unique in that digital teams were able to serve as night support, essentially. So the global community was able to track and keep up activities and essentially overnight products to the teams on the ground, so that their teams can be focusing on what they need to, and they have fresh information that morning.
It also meant we woke up to a big long list of Skype messages to scan.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And so that leads into daily summaries. So one of the things that I've tried to figure out is, because messages can be overwhelming and sometimes conversations happen hours apart while people wake up, I've started developing daily summaries. So essentially, what information is needed, and then how can I link conversations together even if they've occurred over disparate time frames or things like that. When I look at that and I do a simple division between the number of daily summaries and the number of Skype messages, we have 6% is actionable in some manner. That's a pretty false number upon itself, because I'm either combining multiple Skype messages into one message, or sometimes I break a single Skype message into multiple daily summaries as to aid in search. So for example, if you give me 4 PDFs in a single message, well, to make that a little bit easier in searching through summaries, I can link out to each of those. So it's a pretty approximate, but it helps you understand just the sheer volume of information going through there, and how we can sort of collapse stuff down. Fast forward to Ecuador. It was quieter. There is 59% of the people were active, 79 people overall. During the first 7 days, we had 124 notifications on average. And I started looking at this question of, well, how many people are we seeing who are the same? So roughly 43% came from a digital member. 60% were known digital responders, so we've seen them in these communities before. And 72% came from an organization. So it may not be the exact same person, but this community of practice has sort of infiltrated into their org, and now they're like, all right, I can join as well because I'm the person who's deploying this time, which was pretty fascinating. And that those numbers sort of dropped down for the people overall. So if they're higher percentages, if you're active, you're engaged, you understand. Lower percentages for all people within a community makes sense because they're sort of listening in, is the way I understand this. Signal to noise, 11%. I'm cool with that. Like, we have a better understanding of how much noise is going on within the community, and there is actionable and important stuff coming out of this. This was also the case study where the Coordinated Data Scramble Trello board was first launched. So trying to understand a new workflow on how do these communities which are talking, how do we ensure that those data-related discussions are being curated in a manner that people can find and are ultimately being shared. And lastly, and most recently, with Hurricane Matthew in Haiti. So this was also a case where the numbers, this is only in the first 7 days. It's only the first 7 days because that's what I had the time to be able to analyze. So 70 persons, 30 organizations, 64% of the persons were active, so we had a lot of people who were listening in. We also had a lot of people where this was their first time ever engaging in something like this. This time, if I look at the number of formal humanitarian organizations, 73% were affiliated with a formal humanitarian organization, as compared to 27% from a digital or an informal type organization. That's really fascinating to me because normally it's 50-50. And so this was a very different sort of dynamic. Also very different in that nobody talked on the weekends because there weren't volunteers who were like pushing these really big weekend conversations. When I started looking at where these people were based, there was a lot of remote. Also makes sense because this is a digital collaborative space. And so one of the things I'm interested in is that the people who are remotely based, moving in country, and those who are solely in country, trying to increase that number of people who are solely in country, something that Helen also mentioned. And this time, that sort of signal to noise ratio has also increased. So from each time, from Nepal when we first or Ebola when we first started tracking this information, to Nepal, to Ecuador, to Haiti, that signal to noise is increasing, so it's helping me understand, even if this isn't a great metric, it's helping me understand that people are understanding this community and what is important to this community. So they know what information to share and ways to communicate effectively. And this is when we talk about how do we share via a collaborative platform like Skype into Trello, into a platform. This is where this was really kickstarted, and we had a really good case study of this. So essentially, what have we learned and what do we still need? What have we learned? These digital communities are a huge trust network. They depend upon who you know to gain access to them. And they also depend a lot upon having a community of practice, which for good or bad, we try to figure out how to be as inclusive as possible, but also maintain that trust so that people are willing to share data, share resources, and contribute. 100 messages is too many. We finally have a number, and I'm grateful to have that number. It means that these messages are just flowing into a stream of notifications that people don't listen to if we hit too many. In Nepal, my favorite Skype group out of this was called the Nepali Bar and Grill. It was essentially a general chat. So if people wanted to talk to one another, if digital volunteers are like, oh, hey, good to see you again, I haven't seen you since whatever past incident, they can just chat in there, and it means it gets out of the general communication flow. It allows the general notifications to go down. You guys, please, for my sake, don't write like 10 separate messages that ping on my computer 10 times as you're trying to share information. Like, things like that, it allows us to share information a little bit easier. We need a curator, somebody for contacts and daily summaries. That's what I've been doing for a couple times now. In the summaries, the date, time, the URL, who cares about this information, what sort of product it is. And I'm sort of interested in Slack and the potential of creating Slack bots. That way, it's not a physical me curating it, but we can establish, like, pull out all the URLs automatically for all of our products, all of our data sets, and then we can start automating some of this stuff as well, especially as we're talking about integration into coordinated data scramble and into HDX. From Nepal, volunteers supporting in off hours in 24-hour periods. That's really remarkable, and that's also part of the potential of global and digital response, whether it's remote surge, being your headquarters is based somewhere else, or whether it's volunteers being based somewhere else. And it means that we can expand our capacity. And I think that's really remarkable and one of the best things about these communities. And from Ecuador, we saw an amazing case study of local teams developing crisis maps, but they needed help with how to handle volunteers. And so the global digital community said, we know how to handle volunteers, let's partner with you guys, and so we can give you our experience from working in this for years. So it's like a trainer type of situation. And what do we still need? I want to know who these people are who are listening and not contributing. I want to know why, because I want to help them see the potential of this, to understand why they're listening, to understand, is it too loud? Like, is it not effective? How can we better serve? And I'm also interested in the timing between messages. The reason being, it takes time to read things, and sometimes is that non-engaged or non-contributing people are still learning from this community, or have they completely like just turned it off? And that's why I want to understand is how can we better support? And essentially, dissemination is another area I'm really interested in. How do we ensure that this information goes to the public, goes outside of these digital communities? And essentially starting conversations with other people about what works and what doesn't work. And predictive activity planning. So Haiti was a great example of this. We would see the products, we would see what we have already done, and we could share that. But instead of just figuring out, okay, this was done, how can we step in a little bit earlier and help identify the way, ensure that products themselves will build upon one another rather than just saying, here's the output. So essentially we can start saying, ensuring that teams are collaborating with one another more rather than just sharing what they've done. And map filter is actually helping us do that. We can see how many maps are duplicative. So why create a duplicative map if we don't need to? Why don't you create a map which nobody has, and therefore it's remarkably useful because that information isn't anywhere. So that's what I'm really interested in. And I think that's it. Thank you guys.
Thank you, thanks a lot. I don't know which kind of impression you have regarding the previous presentations, but me, I was keeping several thoughts in mind. the work that these guys are doing in the first phase of the emergency is totally critical, and it's going to be very much connected with the case study that I'm going to show to all of you. Because you know what happens when we don't have coordination at any level, or inclusiveness, I like so much, so complementarity. You know what we have? We have the Syria crisis. The case study that I'm going to show you and we will discuss it has been one of the most challenging one for the humanitarian response. It's 6 years already, and it got so bad that really opened the windows for new levels of collaboration, complementarity, and really interesting products. But give you a very quick time frame. You know where the Syria crisis started? Sorry, you don't answer. 2011, and we're in 2016. Until, let's put it in this way. Oh, sorry. At the beginning of 2015, it was a. Oh, sorry. That's super, very good. Until, since the beginning of the crisis until January. Until January 2015, the Syria response didn't have a unified, coordinated approach, which is named the whole of Syria, with or without W. But when we started at the beginning of 2015, we had a situation that the stakeholders, all of them, considering 3 different official hubs, I'm talking about Turkey, Syria, Jordan, plus 2 unofficial hubs, Iraq and Lebanon, they were considering the response in different ways. We had methodologies in terms of data collection and data analysis and humanitarian analysis, meaning that they were scattered, partial, and for sure they were not comparable. The information that we were receiving from Sule and the one that we were receiving from Andrej, they were useless because we couldn't put them together. They were talking different languages and different indicators, different things. And operational and strategic decision-making process, I know that you like this sentence, Andrej, it was a strong lack of needs-based response. Can someone tell me what is a needs-based response? You wanna?
It's like building your response based on the ground, the needs of the ground. It's basically that.
Which is what the coordinated data scramble is starting from the first phase of the emergency response. They really help to establish these, the good foundations for keep developing later on. Some examples. Moreover, the team that was composed, it was a collaboration between several alliances, the one that I'm working for, iMMAP, hosted in the regional office for OCHA, for the Syria crisis. But we knew each other from the past, but we never worked together. We didn't know how to start working. And to make the things more complicated, the humanitarian program cycle was giving us 7 months for fixing the whole city. So, a summary, January 2015. Some of the things you will not believe that you are going to see. We had 3 hubs, as I was telling you, 3 needs analysis. Every hub was making their own analysis. Some of them not limited to a geographical coverage, because each hub was considering, I'm the whole of Syria hub, so I will cover the whole country. I never was there, but nevertheless I will have an opinion. People without knowledge will have opinions. So we had very funny situations. We had several products analyzing the same population, the same conflict affected areas, and the same IDPs movement. So you can imagine that. I think that in French, in very bold French, is la fête du slip. Yeah? It was quite like that. Scattered data initiatives. Every single data collection initiative, so information management organization, was making their own business. Yeah, why to enter into details, no? But different modalities, different methodologies, etc. We had cases of sectors having more people in need than population estimates. Yeah, so if you read carefully both documents before the whole of Syria, you will see some sectors that will say 25 million people in need. Population estimates is not more than 20. Yeah, but they were asking for funding and they were planning their response based on 25 million people. Data sharing, no way that was a big issue. Before the whole of Syria, I was in meetings where multi-stakeholders needs assessments, they were organized. I will not mention the hub. And one of the points of conversation it was, do we allow OCHA colleagues to enter in this room or they stay aside? The lack of trust was amazing, and one of the most added values that we have in this level of collaboration is that, well, I'm OCHA working all the week, but at the end I'm one NGO. You can trust I'm not going to send one of the biggest reasons it was that the people was upset that if the information was shared to OCHA, OCHA will share it with the government, and the response is they were going to be targeted. I don't know from where this conclusion took place, but that was the reality. That was
The Russian is member of the UN Security Council, maybe?
But for there are levels and levels of information. Some levels of information is not. They will never arrive to the Security Council. But the problem is that I participated in one discussion of 2 hours about one community. I will tell you later because you know it. That has 2 streets where one of the positions very strongly and very aggressively was defending that there were 2 million people in a place that is not bigger than Chambéry. 2 hours of discussion. So this is the overall. It was a really wasting energy process. No? And no data setting and methodology, the one from my hubs. The IM actors that are in this hub are the ones that they follow because are the ones that I trust, but those ones that are in another hub, we don't pay attention. So the overall situation was stamped in this way. My data is bigger than yours. Do you think it's a joke? It's a quote. I received that message. So, and because I'm 2 meters tall, I was telling them, well, I'm totally entitled to tell you that the size doesn't matter. Yeah. So 7 months, let's go back. In 7 months, we were able to make a needs-based response for the whole of Syria in 2016. The HNO is the humanitarian needs overview, it's the needs analysis that helps after to make the humanitarian response plan and track and organize the coordinated response for the next year. We had same approaches and common findings. And the third one, which is very much connected, is we were under the umbrella of the needs identification framework, this level of collaboration, is unified methodologies and tools. Now, all the sectors and all the actors, they were talking about the same confidence level about how to evaluate the quality of the data, or severity scales, multi-sectoral, for each of the sectors, how to put indicators and to have an evaluation where is major problem, where is not a problem. That conversation last year took us 2 months of trying to convince each of you, because all these 3 people is only one sector. So we start multiplying by sectors, we have 7, and I need to convince you and you and you, that you can work together having a single tool for defining indicators. This year was not discussions, because the people accepted. They updated some of the indicators, but a question of 15 minutes against 2 months of discussion. And that was the result. Last year it was the first time that in a unified way we were able to make 1,334 entries. From those, some interviews they were face-to-face, at least one were face-to-face, key informants physically, at sub-districts or remote, and we were covering 217 from the 272 sub-districts in Syria. Focus group discussions, you can see several modalities of data collection. But what we have is, do you think that the sectors, if we took WASH, for example, is going to be happy just to have one single questionnaire of a key informant that has knowledge about WASH, but talking about all, I don't know, let me give Paris, Urban Ile de Paris. Do you think that one single person can inform about Paris and surroundings in an accurate way in terms of population and WASH needs? Was not enough. Was good enough. So in 7 months we were able to turn the page in terms of collaboration and inclusiveness and have the same approach. But this for a good humanitarian analysis was not. WASH will need household service. They need to taste the water. Nutrition will need nutritional service. One person that can be an expert on nutrition but giving an information about all Damascus governorate is not going to be enough. So we needed to keep moving forward, and because of that the program got extended. And this is the results for Syria this year. What we have is that we cover, well, let me give you the map because after I have the summary, but 201 sub-districts, they have been covered by partners. This year we include the operational partners. And they were covering 2,600 communities and 49 urban areas at neighborhood level with a revolutionary methodology that never was implemented before. We are able now to know the needs and the situation analysis at neighborhood level, even in besieged areas inside Syria. And because the partners, they cannot have full coverage, still we were counting with the data collection initiatives. So they were covering the other half and 36 urban areas. What is giving us this is that 7 months last year, plus 4 years of crisis, this year in 2 months, the coverage is 270 sub-districts. Depending ones are Golan Heights, so they are under Israeli control, so it's not part of the response. Full coverage. 91% of the communities. Last year it was sub-district, this year is community. It's 5,000 for almost 6,000 communities. And 79 urban areas representing 60% of the population, and 70 is the first time that we can say this. 70% of the IDP population, they have been assessed. And we count with 71 partners from all the hubs, from the official and the official, from those ones in Turkey, in Jordan, in Damascus, but also those ones that they are working from Lebanon and Iraq. Data collection initiatives, totally adapted. Those ones that they wanted, key informant, household. Focus group discussions for protection, for instance, focus group discussions. And all this was tailored to one tool, Kobo. If you want to know more about how we put on the edge Kobo in order that every hub and every sector will be able just to take and gather the information that was interested, I can tell you that the Kobo servers they were about to exploit for a while. And all sectors without exception, last year we missed some of the sectors, they were actively collaborating and without problems, with a good level of trust. And more importantly, and I think that we should highlight this, all the IM actors, they were setting roles and responsibilities. Here we have some colleagues from GIPS, but I can tell you that iMMAP is collaborating, RITS has been collaborating, GIPS, and some actors like GeOnG Habitat, that is not a traditional humanitarian actor, is defining a methodology for urban profiling, and is establishing a consortium with the same rationale of the whole of Syria for keep analyzing the needs. So suddenly, we have much better and more integrated way of making the things. And it was very beautiful because at the beginning, no one believed that iMMAP can work with this or other organization or whatever. And when we put it on the table, everything came totally naturally. So now, the organograms of this of the urban community profiling is a co-shared responsibility between iMMAP, GIPS, and GeOnG Habitat and RITS. I have the data analyst, you have the EIS, I have the urban expert. That's super. And 6 years of crisis for achieving things as simple as this. We have population. I'm only talking about the intersectoral data, the sectoral data, WAS, nutrition, etc. They make their own business, but also is unified. Because we have a sectoral people in need, everyone agrees at community level. We have a population and IDPs estimates at community level. Those ones that they have been participating in the Syria crisis, they knew how the population was moving to one place to another, and as I was telling you, some sectors they were making more people in need than population. We have applied and confirmed a very friendly methodology for gender and age disaggregation and disability. We tested in the field, covering 91% of the communities, and come on, it matches. We have gender and age disaggregation for Syria, which is very useful for the response. We have disaggregation of these several categories by area of control, government control, opposition, ISIL, Kurdish areas, etc. We have urban and rural disaggregation for first time. Now we can say 60% of the population is living in urban areas. And access status disaggregation. Depending the levels of access, if we can access, we cannot access, we are able to do it. So now, something that should happen during the first month of the response, but we are 6 years, finally the Syria crisis can get focused on needs monitoring instead of needs identification and response and gaps. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Hi, so the few minutes I would like to spend with you talking on this roundtable is a little bit different from what you have been hearing up to now. It's coming from the complete other end. I would say it's coming from an organization, so Doctors Without Borders, MSF, who is quite young in GIS and even more in information management, where on the complete end of the user side we are discovering. And I would like to say mainly two things during this presentation. This first give you a little bit of an history, taking the case study of Ebola operations during the Ebola crisis. And the second one is to invite the entire roundtable to at least evocate a few bottom line points that we might ask to ourselves and to each other that might be a little bit cliché but are important also to mention at some point. So data coordination and experience of MSF using all the nice systems and tools and ideas proposed up to now started in 2014. That's the pointer. Next one. I will approach it with two limits. The first one is I really limited the discourse I'm going to have as seen from the field. It was the vision and the perception we have on daily use, on everyday use in one of the worst emergencies, one of the worst humanitarian crises that has been seen over the last years. And the second one is, I will have to mention this is made from the GIS side. In MSF, we have always a clear line of dividing what is medical, what directly concerns the patient, and what is not. And when it does, then the level of concern and the level of attention we put to managing this kind of information suddenly goes up several levels. And in that case, there might be questions later about medical data. In that case, sometimes I will have to tell you that I cannot answer them because I'm not medical. This is seen from the mapping, cartography, and information management in MSF. Why Ebola? It was a human and medical catastrophe with especially poor environment for information. There was areas where we had absolutely nothing to start with. No maps, no information, very little vision. We had what I call heavy operational informational gaps. It was a tense context, not as tense as some other contexts when it gets physically tense and dangerous, but it was a tense one from several points of view, which I will mention a little bit later. Media coverage, political questions and complications, and that actually has also linked with the information of the management of the information you have and the way you communicate about it. And also, this is rather an internal reason for me to intervene in this case study. It's because for us it was a typical example of the challenges we meet and the challenges we will meet in big emergencies in MSF. It was our first large sky field GIS experience. It was, I would say, the first baby cries of information management as well in MSF on the mapping side. And it was also a case where we were the organization who had to face the challenge of being, at the same time, one of the users who actually needed a lot of information, but actually being the ones who also provided and produced also a lot of information, be it medical or be it contextual. Vital need for what? Once again, the mission of MSF is simple. It's stop the outbreak, like everybody else. It's find and treat. At that stage of the outbreak, at that type of humanitarian crisis, when you are in this kind of timing, with this kind of gravity, you're on the field, your aim is simple and you don't have to think about anything else. It's find and treat and stop. For this, we talked about it earlier, we need to know where. And sometimes what we need is quite simple data. Simple data is not the solution to everything, but simple data can give you already a nice percentage of what you need to perform your simple, immediate, life-saving aid. That's primary and secondary data, review data, sorry. So that's basically where are my patients? Where are the place where I can find the people I need to treat? This information is part of what I called the ROC information. It's ROC because at that time, it's generally nowhere in the virtual world. It needs to be extracted directly from the head of the people and the reality around you. Secondary data review for me, it's data which I need to compare this information to guide my teams. It's information about the population of my area. It's the information that helps me to understand the primary one. Okay, I've got 2 cases in that part of the city, but what is the population estimation for that part of the city? Is it actually a priority? And that can, if you have a good quality data of that level, you can have a good interpretation of your primary data, of your ROC data, and you take the good decision. A couple of wrong decisions were taken during that crisis, and that was sometimes because of the lack of secondary review data. And the third kind, I would say, it's everything which is around, it's context. It's base mapping, context, aspects, logistics, political context, everything that helps you to take more complete decisions. And these ones, I would say it's the opposite of the first one. Most of the time you don't have to extract it from the head of the people or from the reality or from the village. It's already existing. It's around, and the way is how you can access it on the field. Tyranid, I have spoken a little bit about that already. It lasted all along the outbreak, and that is something I'd like to mention as well. At the end of the outbreak, when we had to take suddenly an operational decision, because suddenly 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 25 new cases of Ebola, suddenly, we actually realized that for different reasons, we still were thirsty for information, and we were still a bit clueless about where to find it. Early stage, it was because the data was not available. It was close to null in some areas. But later, on the later stage, it was because it was more complete but more complex and hard to manage for us. And that is where information management and discussion groups such as the one we talked before come into action. Both because they help, but also because we have concerns and questions and doubts, which is natural when you learn a new way of working. I will go fast on this, but that's just to give you an idea of if there is no other way, the way we do collect information in NSF. We do further harvest of existing data, local partners, organization memory, thanks to the support of the HQ, which is not in emergency phase at the moment and has a little bit more vision to help you. Population knowledge, once again the ROC data. Then it's data generation. I call it generation and not collection because that is information that would not have existed if there was no activity. It's the information produced by the activity of the NGO itself. It would be the data you collect from your patients, from the people you are actually treating, about the people they eventually connected with, the people potentially they have been transmitting the disease to, and so on and so on. It's generated along the way. And then finally, you've got the ground data collection outside, which is GPS, MDC, etc., or remote support by the help of OpenStreetMap, by missing maps, and so on. Digitalization. When we have finished the way of collecting data and we need to share and organize and coordinate it, what were the things we realized during this Ebola crisis? The first one is a little bit of a history view. Before that crisis, information management, information sharing in MSF, once again not medical but everything else, was almost at zero. We had a couple of interesting initiatives, we had a couple of various scale experiences, but that was the first time where it was really, not a policy, but I would say a common way, a common will, with position, with people, with time and means invested to coordinate that information. Also, it was the first time we had contact with groups such as HDX, Skype group of IM, at least on such a scale. Also, it was a starting point for us. It kicked off the development of our relations with different organizations dealing with informations. It can be on the mapping side, such as OSM and missing maps. It can be on the health and medical side, such as mobile health and so on. And that was the first step. So, going straight into the points. I will make two slides, one with the challenges we met and the questions and the doubts we might have, and one with the good points about it. None of these ones should be considered as a critic. It's an interrogation we ask first for ourselves, because everything you are doing here, that's something we are trying to do on a smaller scale, inside the organization, between doctors. So, the first one is structural issues, the numbers and the identity of the data coordination members in the group. That's something which has been mentioned many times before, that's something we are all conscious. Sometimes there is just too many people around. If, imagine there is already too many people around, for people who are actually in an office or in an international level, imagine what it is when you are struggling with a big N, with a very limited connection, and you are out there in the doing the field. How many people is too much? How many answers by day on the Skype group is too much? It's hard for me to give an answer, but let's admit it, during that Ebola, we missed a lot of information because there was too much going around. Also, too many various requests, not always relevant. What I'm trying to explain here is one of the bad effects that can have this Skype group is to push to have people actually connecting to you outside the Skype group. Because they see that you are in the field, they see you're an organization producing data that interests them, and they try to go around the group and contact you directly, and you have to block many requests like this. That's not something the group can have control of, but that's something we need to be conscious about also. And so you've got people from various universities, various countries who call you at any time asking for data. And this, we struggle with. Difference of pace and timing. here, the word emergency might take a different meaning for a digital community and for a humanitarian community. When we are talking about an emergencies in the humanitarian community and in MSF particularly, and in a crisis like Ebola in particular, we are talking about minutes and hours. It can be a 9 p.m. request for 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and still we have no internet, so how to deal with this kind of thing, how to anticipate that. That does not mean that the two paces, the two rhythms that we have cannot be coordinated. It's just that information that comes on HTX, for example, a couple of days rather than a couple of hours after a request, for example, can have lost 70-80% of its value. Once again, it's not a problem, but it's something we need to consider and to ask ourselves about when we plan and we try to anticipate. Misleads to so I would say the structural issues. It's a question, that's something we need to interrogate about, but it's not something for me which is blocking. It complicates a little bit, but it's not blocking. What can be blocking for us and can lead to real misinterpretations or wrong decisions and have serious consequences will be the two bottom lines. It will be misleads and leads to inaccurate or outdated data. This, I would like to precise it, was the exception and obviously not a rule. But it still does happen. And what we would need as users is also some kind of filters and auto-validation of every answer we need. Should be double-checked and triple-checked. You will see on the good side that I present just after is when that you have one precise interlocutor to talk to and not a group. Then it becomes much easier, and this kind of preoccupation actually goes out most of the time. Good practices improvement, that is something that from an external point of view we saw, and that puts up some doubts about that. It's like, I would take two examples. In April 2015, in Ebola, in Guinea, there has been a data set which has been shared to us and to various organizations, which was a data set of approximately 31,000 villages made by the government of Guinea. That data set was very clearly expressed not to be shared. And somehow, we see somebody quite angry from the Institute of National Statistics who comes straight at our office and say, why is that data set all going around in emails, in groups, and in publications? We're like, no clue, didn't go through us. But I won't say this is in any way a consequence of having a group and a coordination of information, but if you have much more information going around, okay, you also have the risk of bad practices, which can lead then to operational problem in our case, because we then needed a little bit of days and of weeks to re-upgrade our relations with that data provider until it was okay. Another one would be another on our side. When we see data suddenly going around, a lot of requests for MSF data, and we see publications that, in that case, I won't quote the name, we see publication with our data, like literally copy and paste, where somebody just decided to change the logo. Then it becomes a huge pull on the brakes for us, GIS and IMs in MSF, baby ones, who are trying to educate our own organization to grow in this kind of thing. It becomes a heavy pull on the brakes. So once again, it's not something that happens regularly, at least. It's once again in the domain of an exception, but that's one of the traps that we will meet on the way. And special care should be taken to avoid them in the future, if we could. But the good, I'm in love. First thing is, yes, we did get useful answers, we did get request channeling, and that was nice. Especially when there is one responsible person. I used with my colleague on the field to call that the lighthouse. So you arrive in a new project, you arrive in a new Skype group, because there is one in Liberia, there is one in Guinea, there is one in Sierra Leone, and you talk to each other, you're like, how is the Skype group? Yeah, lighthouse is that person. That means basically the person I'm going to ask if I have something, because I don't have time to spread my request to all the people they should go to. But there was one person in the Skype group, and actually I didn't even know I was going to meet her here, but in Monrovia that was Helen, that I could address to. I did not have time to speak to the 214 people I have seen once on the Skype group, half of them being people from universities in the US. But I have one person who actually gets what I need. And this, precise individuals were identified and answering, is something that works positively. Reference data, so here that's the second level of data, the one you are going to compare your patient information to population and so on. was provided and proven useful. It was not always useful, but it has been proven useful in some areas. And automatic consultation of the HDX and all available data is now a standard in MSF GIS unit. That is something which should be considered as a positive result. One which might be for me one of the most important things, because that was something we were absolutely unable to do by ourselves at the moment, is the possible role IM and data coordination groups can take as coordination filters. What do I mean? Once again, an example. That was Monrovia at the middle of the worst part of the crisis, and there was an organization. I won't put its name, but that was an organization which we could not ever talk to officially on the field. It's something that MSF will never talk to that organization, not because they don't go along, but because of our chart prevents us to address these kind of factors, officially at least. But they had data and they were willing to put it at the disposal of whoever needed it. Thanks to the IM and data coordination group acting as a filter, we were able to talk to this information, but at the same time respect our position and the image in the line we need to keep when we are in emergencies. And that was a big help, because we really needed at that moment the data provided by this. As I said before, it helps organizations like MSF, who are clearly not techie organizations, clearly not technology oriented. It helps us to grow, and all of us in this room, we are either working in or are interested in GIS, information management, and so on. We come from various backgrounds. We come from organizations where we need to grow in this. And for us, this kind of space, this kind of time, this kind of crisis was the school time. It gave results, and we gained several years in MSF simply in the Ebola crisis. That really was a push this time, not on the brake, but on the accelerator. And for that was for you. Okay. So once again, just as I said before, you've got several levels of data with timing and importance, which varies. Generally, you can manage one or two, but not the three of them. So the rock data, the data you will compare to, and the reference data. But the best proof we need more coordination than this, and we agree, and yes to this, is that on the smaller scale, inside the organization, we see the same principles to apply. So yes, that works. So yes to more coordination for the data, yes to more tools, but how? And the two priorities that comes to our minds. And once again, this is from the field. This is not any other thing. But it's the first one is efficiency focused. As we said before, simplify the structure of communication. Why not a multi-layered structure when we can address to a limited number of information focal points? Let's take again the concept of lighthouses. That was very useful. Working on what exists at the beginning, because when we arrive as humanitarian community on the ground, generally in the first house, you can already see the nexus of information that works and the one which won't work. The people who are active, the people who are proactive, and the people who are able to respond, they will link together. They will link by phone, they will link by phone, by email, not using coordination group yet, but they will. So when we grow this coordination group, let's try to anchor them to what is already existing on the field at the moment. And it's a question of hours and days. And grasping that momentum will be very important to have something that works in the future. Also, reference data this time. Really, there is a possibility to work before with the governments, with the ways we have to digitize using satellite imagery, with OSM, with missing maps. There is a way to anticipate because we know where the crises are going to happen. At least, generally. Not on a precise functional level, but we know the places where we know it will happen again. So let's try to anticipate. It's a bit more difficult because it's less sexy. It's less important, it's less mediatized, but that's one of the points we can really focus and improve. Good practices of data management. Protecting beneficiaries and of potentially harmful effect of the data. That is something actually that I put here as a reminder for us at the moment. We in MSF have a lot of discussions about it at the moment, about the ethics of the data. It has been going around a lot over the last dozens of years because MSF has not started to think about it recently. But linking data ethics and GIS and mapping and information management, such as the level we are discussing here, this is something we are trying to focus on the moment. I don't have any specific recommendation on it, but that really should be mentioned. It is a cliché, yes, but there is a reason for that. It is important. Sharing policies respecting properties and ownership. The two examples I gave you of the little glitches that we met around Ebola, the consequences were actually not so light. It was days lost, it was relations with local data provider made difficult, and that cost us a lot of time and means. And lastly, collaborative approach with local national data actors. On a national level, country per country, and also on international level in structures such as the African Union and so on, you've got actually people with more and more skills, technical skills, presence, and ability to respond also to have. When we arrive, the first thing we always try to do is to connect directly with these people first. On a common level, it should be, the most added value we'll have when we try to imply them will be to imply them from the beginning. It's not always logistically possible because we don't work in the same way, the same place, not always, the digital community and the local data provider, the local data administrators. But as it was said before, we are now working with tools with a lot of connectivities. It should be possible in pre-talks such as this that we have at the moment. It should be possible to contact with these people even if it's not logistically possible to be physically at the same place. Isn't that exactly what we do when we use CartONG and so on? And thank you very much.